Mr Speaker, over the last few years, the Conservative Party has dragged the reputation of this House through the mud and left it festering in the gutter. 3 weeks ago, when the Privileges Committee published their report, which found Mr Johnson lied to this House and to the people of this country, many people must have thought that standards in public life had hit rock bottom, that they couldn't get any lower. And yet the shameful actions of senior Tory MPs spelled out in the report we're debating today have damaged public's trust in Parliament further still. Some, I'm afraid to say, from the comfort of their own bully pulpit TV shows, attacking the personal character and integrity of individual members of the committee. Some accused the committee of not following due process and did everything they could to whip up an atmosphere of distrust, throwing their toys out of the pram as if it was one rule for them and their friend and another for everyone else. And they were quite wrong. While their attempts to undermine and attack Britain's democratic institutions are shocking, it is important that we remember that they were not successful, that this House did vote to approve the committee's report into Mr Johnson in full and sanction him appropriately. Just like their friend they were trying to get off the hook, unfortunately, the named MPs are having to be held accountable today for their actions. And I share the Right Honourable Lady's desire for them to use today's debate to set a line, to show that they have recognised what they have done, and so that we can move on. Now, this matters because we have to approve the report in full. As it says, our democracy depends on MPs being able to trust what ministers say in the House of Commons is the truth. And if ministers cannot be trusted to tell the truth, the House cannot do its job, and the confidence of the public in our whole political system is undermined. In other words, telling the truth is the foundation of a functioning Parliament. And when there are allegations that a minister has not told the truth, we simply must have a mechanism for investigating them. If we did not, there'd be no way to hold them to account, and that is the role of the Privileges Committee. The motion we are debating today protects the committee and allows them to continue to do their job on our behalf when we instruct them to do so. It ensures that they can carry out their work so that we and the people of this country can trust what ministers say. This is about protecting democracy. The motion puts into effect the report's recommendation, aiming to stop MPs putting improper pressure on the committee and its members in future. Because improper pressure was put on the committee during the inquiry into Mr Johnson. That was an exceptionally important piece of work that went right to the heart of public's trust in politicians. And this report now makes clear to varying degrees, as listed clearly in the annex to the report as examples, that the named Tory MPs attempted to discredit the committee and its conclusions, in some cases before they'd even seen them, even pushing for resignations. Now, this ultimately amounted to a coordinated campaign by Mr Johnson's allies to influence the outcome of the inquiry in favour of their friend. As I've mentioned, this was made worse. Yes, I'm happy to give way.
Coordination of a campaign. Where is the evidence in this report of that? It's just an assertion, isn't it?
Exactly. I said it amounted to a coordinated campaign, and it did. And it did. Every single one of these adds up, encourages others, encourages members of the public, encourages other politicians to take part. And, as I've mentioned, it was made worse by the fact that two of those mentioned, mounting the most vociferous attacks, did so from the platform of their own hosted TV shows. And the named MPs accused the committee of being a kangaroo court and the process a witch hunt. And in reality, as they must know, this couldn't be further from the truth. This committee detailed its processes in advance. It took every possible step to ensure fairness. It took legal advice from the Right Honourable Sir Ernest Ryder, from Speaker's Council, from the clerks of the House on how to apply the general principles of fairness, the rules of the House and procedural precedents. Happy to give way.
On the basis of fairness, does she believe that it's fair that members of this House were investigated and listed in a report without prior knowledge that that was going to happen?
Leader of the House.
The committee was open to the members concerned making their representations to the committee in the proper way, and they did not. They published a report last summer setting out its intended processes, and members could have taken part in a number of ways, which I will detail. It made further public comments on its workings when appropriate. It gave Mr Johnson further time to respond to the evidence and make his own submission. In short, Mr Speaker, the committee did everything they possibly could to ensure fairness and transparency. I'll happily give way.
Thank for giving way. Does she agree with me that when the Privileges Committee is meeting, it cannot engage in answering allegations about what it's doing in the press? It has to continue its work until it's completed, and that the rules of the House require that other people should refrain from commenting on it or calling it into disrepute until the actual document is printed and the report has been laid before the House.
Thank my right honourable friend for that intervention. She is absolutely correct. And a cursory glance to the standing orders of this place would have informed those members of that. Now, I do want to take a small moment to put again on record my thanks to the members of the committee on all sides who have worked so hard to come to a unanimous conclusion, and the clerks who, under considerable pressure, continue to work to uphold the integrity of this House and its standard system. Now, Mr Speaker, in my view, the named MPs should apologise. Unfortunately, instead, some of them so far have doubled down, claiming that what they've said is merely them exercising their right to freedom of speech. That is absolute nonsense, Mr Speaker. They tried to interfere in a disciplinary procedure that was voted for unanimously by this House. Nobody voted against it. If those members had wanted to, as the report sets out, there were other legitimate ways open to them as MPs who want to influence any Privileges Committee inquiry. I'll refresh their memories. They could have had their say on the MPs appointed to the committee. They could have opposed the motion instructing the committee to look into this in the first place. They could have submitted evidence. There were any number of legitimate avenues open to them, but instead of properly engaging, they pursued illegitimate ways. And Mr Speaker, I'm afraid this all comes back to integrity in politics. Last month, when the committee published its report into Mr Johnson, the current Prime Minister also had an opportunity to draw a line between him and his predecessor. He could have shown some leadership. He could have pressed the reset button. He could have lived up to his promise of integrity, professionalism and integrity and accountability, but mired by splits and division in his own party. He was too weak to stand up to his former boss. I'll happily give way.
I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady giving way. Does she not think that on a debate on privileges, perhaps now is not the time to enter into cheap party politics?
Thangnam Debbonaire.
I have to remind the honourable gentleman that we are all bound by that same code of conduct, and that includes the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister found time last week to comment on cricket, but could not find time either to comment on the lies of his predecessor, or, I'm responding to the honourable gentleman, or to the committee. He could have shown some leadership, as I said, but as well as not voting, he couldn't even bring us himself to give us a view. At the liaison committee last week, the Prime Minister said he hadn't even read the report. It is not long. It is about his own MPs. Has he read the report now? Does he understand why this matters so much? If so, does the leader know if we'll get to hear what he thinks of today's motion? Does he accept the committee's conclusions? Will he be voting to approve the report in full? He is the Prime Minister. This matters because it was a predecessor Prime Minister of his who has brought us to this point through lying to this House. And if we want to turn the corner, if we want to move on, if those honourable members shaking their heads opposite really want to turn the corner, it matters that the current Prime Minister has failed even to draw a difference between himself and his predecessor. The Prime Minister also... Yes, happily give way.
Thank you. I feel that the Honourable Lady didn't really fully give an answer to my colleague from Grimsby. Now, how would the Honourable Lady feel if on a Monday you had a letter from court saying you've been found guilty of, after a court hearing on the Friday of which you had no prior knowledge, no summons and no opportunity to give your evidence? Does that feel like natural justice? This is, after all, nothing to do with Boris Johnson. That's so last week. This is today.
But the thing is, I thank the honourable gentleman for that intervention because it gives me the opportunity to remind the entire House this is not a court. It is a procedural committee that was assessing evidence that was publicly available. We're talking about tweets and TV shows, none of which were hidden. Now, the Prime Minister also claimed that Lord Goldsmith had quit as a minister after refusing to apologise for his actions. Lord Goldsmith said that wasn't true, so which is it? Did the Prime Minister ask him to apologise? More importantly for today's debate, has he asked his own named MPs to apologise? And if not, why not? Will he do so? And as Leader of the House, has she spoken to her colleagues about this? I want to end, Mr Speaker, by reiterating that the Privileges Committee is a key piece of Britain's democratic jigsaw. We must not allow it to be caught up in a Tory psychodrama. Its work is far too important for that, and all credit to all the MPs on that committee for putting their own allegiances to one side and being able to do that work. Labour respects the committee. We respect the rules and processes of this House. We know that without them, our democracy fractures. I stand ready to vote for the motion today, approving the report in full, and I urge colleagues on all sides of the House to do the same.